Well, today on the show we have a great guest, Mark Petersen, CEO of Stronger Philanthropy, who is overseeing, get this, $39 million in grants awarded to organizations in Canada. He's also written this book, Love Giving Well, The Pilgrimage of Philanthropy. And he shares with us today about the parallels between giving and his pilgrimage in the Camino. Imagine walking 800 kilometers in over a month on your own on the dusty trails of the Camino. We're going to learn a lot about countercultural living. We're going to learn about why we must give and how it's a responsibility as people in this world to care for one another. That's coming up next on Your Story with Melinda. Mark Petersen, thank you for coming on Your Story with Melinda. It's so great to have you here.
Thanks, Melinda. It's good to see you.
Well, in my intro, just prior to this interview, I talked about how you've walked and you were a pilgrim on the Camino 3 times.
Yeah.
And I guess to start off this interview, my question is, why would anybody in their right mind want to walk 800 kilometers by themselves in the sun, in the heat, for that long? Why would you want to walk 3 times on the Camino, Mark? Tell me, please.
It's, you know what, everybody has a different reason for walking the Camino. And in my own case, I have a very busy life, lots of demands, and I needed a break from that. And in 2014, I went on the Camino with my son, Nate. And it was a father-son bonding time. And it was a chance just to kind of get into a different space and process life, all the things. I'm in my middle age, so, you know, it was one of those midlife crisis types of things. But I loved it so much that I did it 2 more times alone.
Wow.
And, you know, it's a great opportunity just to get your head in the right space in terms of your life and your future, and reconnect with God and with who you are. And I felt I needed that.
So 800 kilometers, it's a pilgrimage. Thousands of people do this thing called the Camino.
Yeah.
Tell me what it is. Give us a picture of what's the Camino's purpose. Where did that even idea come from of walking, you know, this distance in Spain? And just paint that picture for us.
Yeah, you know, there's over 200,000 people walk the Camino every year now. It's grown in popularity in the past couple decades. But it's really a 1,000-year-old tradition that has happened since medieval times. And so if you kind of put yourself back in those in the medieval period, and think about what life in Europe was like back then. You know, there's no internet, no TV, no books. How did these people connect with God? How did they connect with their faith? And the way that they did it is a very bodily way. You know, they actually physically walked to Santiago, this city in northwest Spain, which had a church there, the cathedral. In the cathedral are the remains of the Apostle James. This is the Apostle James. Do you remember the story of James and John, and the mother wanted them to sit on either side of Jesus in heaven? And that's that same James. His bones are in this place. And so people would walk from all over Europe, from Paris, from Berlin, from Geneva. They would walk through Europe all the way into Spain, and as all those paths coalesced in Spain, what's the path in Spain is called the Camino, and that's what people are walking now. So it's an 800-kilometer pilgrimage that people are doing today.
Mark, what do they do on that? I mean, there must be many different kinds of reasons people walk the Camino, but the main purpose for each person, obviously it's motivated differently, but what would you say in general why somebody would want to spend that month to over a month doing it?
Yeah. I mean, I think our world we're feeling very fragmented. You know, our lives are busy, we're disconnected from God and from each other. We're connected to technology, but not much else. You know, and I think stripping life of all of these extra things And walking a Camino can be really healing, and it can put you back in a better space again. It can reorientate your perspective on life back home.
Now, you know, in your book, in the stories you've shared with me, you know, I see the pictures of like a staff, seashells, hostels, washing your clothes in rivers. Like it sounds so primitive.
You're carrying everything on your back. It's all in a backpack. You know, you have to make sure every item that you've put in your backpack, you're going to carry for a month across Spain.
Wow.
So you better make sure that it's useful to you if you're going to carry it that far.
And the people that you meet from all over the world, you said 200,000 people come, you know, each year to do this. You meet
some characters.
Characters, and this is what this is my segue, Mark, right to you. You must have met at least one pilgrim sojourner that, you know, captured you in your imagination or learned from as you sat around the table or whatever, you know, after you've walked. Tell me just a little story about somebody that just really inspired you, or was just an interesting person that you met along the way.
Well, there was one day on my second Camino, I was walking through the woods and mountains of northern Spain, and I was walking with a German and an American at this point. And these are people that I just happened to meet along the way, you know, and the American, I ended up walking for 2 weeks with him. But we're walking along through the mountains. They both had these technical walking poles, you know, like they were really into it. And I didn't have any stick or staff or pole to walk with. And I was missing it because the previous year I had walked with a stick that I had found along the way. And because the topography was so challenging at that point, it was quite mountainous. So I was really starting to miss having an extra support along the way. And we're walking through the woods, and they start questioning me, and they said, you know, hey, why aren't you walking with a stick? Where's your stick? And I said, well, you know, I walked last year with a stick, and I fell in love with that stick. And when I flew home to Canada, I checked it with my luggage on the plane, and when I arrived in Toronto, the airline had lost my stick. So I thought, oh, well, next year when I start walking the Camino, I'll get another stick. So I was all 5 days in on this new journey and waiting for the stick to show up, you know, because I knew it would. I knew one of the sayings on the Camino is the Camino will provide. Okay. And this is one of the things you discover is as you walk along, the things that you need come into your hands, you know, and it's the way that I think God works. You don't have to stress about it. You don't have to get all bent out of shape. The Camino provides, and God provides. And so we were walking through these mountains, and my friends are saying, you know, oh, what about this stick here? Well, what about that? They're digging in the woods, and they're pulling up, you know, options for me, and this one's too short, and this one's too thick, and this one's too wobbly, and nothing was working. And I said, hey, you guys, just settle down. You know, let's just keep walking. I said, the Camino will provide. And I'm not lying, and I'm not stretching the truth in any way by saying what I'm going to say. Okay. But within 5 minutes of me saying that, and by the way, we're in the middle of nowhere. We haven't seen a single person all day.
Wow.
We're in the middle of the woods. Within 5 minutes of me saying, don't worry, my stick will find me when it's time. There was a man in the woods, a Basque man, a guy who lived in the woods. Okay. And we're walking along, and this man pops out of the woods, and he yells to me in Spanish, and he says, hey, you need a stick. And he walked over to a holly tree and held it up and started cutting down this branch off this holly tree and stripping it of all the little branches. And he walks over and he presents me with a stick. And it was the perfectly formed walking stick that this Basque man just created for me in the middle of the forest.
It's amazing.
And I mean, that was just such a crazy story of how, you know, things are provided.
I love that. And then what did the two friends say?
We couldn't believe it. I mean,
you're like, I told you so.
We could not believe it. And it was just, quite hilarious, and yet I think there's a real lesson, a life lesson for us in that. And that's the thing about the Camino is, there's time and space to really open yourself up to these life lessons. This is only one of many.
Mark, in saying that, do you think that in the busyness of our culture, for those who aren't living in that place of the Camino or in maybe a rural setting or whatnot, have we lost that? I mean, when you talk about this provision, we're always wanting to provide for ourselves and make it happen. That's the kind of people that we are. You just stand there and go, no, it will provide. God will provide. The Camino will provide for me. Why do you think we've lost that? And what's the danger of losing that kind of faith and hope of provision from God?
Well, I think in our Western culture, we've become so self-sufficient, so comfortable. We don't need anything, really. I mean, we don't need God. Yeah. We don't need the support of others even, we think. And everything is provided. Everything is we're so insured by all kinds of other supports that, if there's any calamity, there's coverage there for us.
Right.
And I think the Camino for me kind of puts you in a place where everything else is stripped away, and you recognize your dependence, that you have need of other people, you have need of God, you have need of submitting yourself to others.
For those who can't or won't or could never make it to a Camino to experience that, how would you experience that in the everyday? You're going to work 9 to 5, you've got kids, you've got demands. How can you find that space to experience what you have about that sort of stripping away and saying there's simplicity to it, there's friends along the way, and just trusting that God would provide? How do you do that in the everyday?
Well, I think you can be creative and find ways to do that. It takes discipline. It takes intentionality. But you can walk out your door and start walking. Anybody can do that. Don't take your iPod. Don't take, you don't have to have all the fancy gear. Everybody, most people can walk out their door. So just start doing that on a daily basis. Go for an hour-long walk.
That's good.
Take the time. I think it's for our health.
Yeah.
And for our spiritual sanity that we need to do these things.
I think that's a good point, Mark, because I think it's choices we make and the intentionality to do it. If we don't make it a priority or we think it's important, we're not going to do it. But I think what you're saying is even in those simple things, just take a walk, unplug, go for 10, 15, 20 minutes and come back. And you can find that time. It's if you want to find the time to do that.
Yeah.
So I think that's a good lesson. I'm always fascinated about when people do things like these kinds of adventures, what kinds of lessons come out of it. And I think that what you've shared is really important about, that dependence on God and trusting that He will provide. Now, in your latest book, Mark, Love Giving Well, The Pilgrimage of Philanthropy, congratulations, by the way.
Thank you.
It's a beautiful parallel that you have, that as a philanthropist, you see the parallels of pilgrimage in that, in giving, you learned a lot from the Camino that actually, is in step with giving in your, philanthropic life and what you do. Before we get to those, because I think those are fascinating, that those lessons and values are for everybody to learn from. Why don't you help us understand just what is a philanthropist? I mean, we've heard that. I know people have read it and heard it, but I don't know if people really know what that means. And can anybody be a philanthropist today?
Yeah, I think, a better, maybe a more helpful word could be giver.
Okay, yeah.
And all of us can give. All of us know that giving is something that, I think it's part of our DNA that God created us in order to be givers. When we're made in God's image, who is God but someone who gives? He gave His only Son. Jesus surrendered Himself to us. And we are made in God's image. And we are all, in a sense, philanthropists in that way. We all need to give in order to fulfill our human identity in order to reach kind of the better place of who we can be. You look at people that don't give. You look at people that surround themselves with their things, and they become cloistered in their homes with stuff. And it's a very impoverished, sad life that they live. I think all of us can become philanthropists. So I wrote my book because of my work when I am working with philanthropists who are larger donor families in Canada. But I think that the principles in the book can be applied to anybody who is giving in any way.
I think that's important. And I think, can you share just a little bit of background about how you and your family decided to become philanthropists in that way about giving? Because, there are people that have means, they have a business, but they've never thought about actually, sort of being philanthropists in that way, about giving, their money away. It's, again, what you just said. A lot of people are like, I want to be more focused on sort of material gain, and they lose the beauty of giving. But how did your family come up with that idea?
I think we really need to critique our culture and resist what our culture tells us is most important, and look at it through a biblical framework and lens. If you listen to culture and respond to the dominant refrain out there, it's accumulate success, wealth, all of those things are the most important things. They aren't. And there are people who follow Christ who have incredible successes in their careers that are able to amass a fortune, let's say. And so my challenge to them would be, how do you live your life in light of that? And so with our family, we've learned how to do that, to disperse these funds, to benefit those who have need, but in a way that is strategic, that is responsible, and isn't throwing the money away to the wind, because we're held to account for those assets. We need to be responsible with what we're doing with those. And so that's what I'm trying to communicate in the book, for my own family, but other families as well that are clients of mine, that there are responsible ways to manage and surrender these resources for the benefit of society.
That's amazing. And we're so thankful for your family in that, because your family has given how much millions of dollars to help organizations in Canada? It's been
it's approaching $40 million.
$40 million. Yeah. So $40 million you've given to organizations to help local support. What kinds of things have you supported?
Our focus has been on Christian charities mainly, and the focus has really had two wings. One is to build capacity for charities. So by that I mean help strengthen the ability of organizations to achieve their mission in a way that is effective. And that's one wing of it, and the other wing is the innovation wing. So we fund into new initiatives that help take that organization beyond its current platform in something new and fresh.
I love that thoughtfulness, Mark. It's not just like you're just throwing your money away and saying just help whoever, but that you as a family and the work that you do, it's very strategic.
It's also very competitive. And so the process that I've developed, some people find it a problem because it's a competition. And because there are so many coming at us with requests, there had to be a way for us to discern what's the best way for us to be effective with these resources. And so the framework I've developed has given me the tools to be able to discern that. But it has become a competitive process, and organizations need to up their game and really perform beyond expectation to achieve a funding partnership with our partners.
Yeah, I think that's good though. I
Yeah.
think everybody needs to up their game,
Yeah.
And look strategically and have a plan of where they are moving forward, versus just assuming they're just going to receive the funds because they're here.
Right.
I think that's important. Now, going back to your pilgrimage on the Camino.
Yeah.
In your book, but even I know in your own life, there's again these what we talked about, these parallels between philanthropy and pilgrimage.
Yeah.
And in your book, I love these points, but the three I want to focus on. I think the first one is you talk about that pilgrimage discards excess baggage, and you've talked about that. But you've also said that that's like your own philanthropic, decision making and understanding of it. Talk to me about that.
I'd love to jump into that at this point. The idea of it's kind of interesting, and I mean, I'm probably the first person in the world that's ever connected the idea of pilgrimage and philanthropy. And I know it might seem kind of obscure for some people, but for me, it took on a real meaning as I was walking. But as I was walking, I was realizing how philanthropy, the act of giving and being generous and surrendering, your resources and yourself to others. There's a lot that is similar to the pilgrimage, where you needed to let go of all those support systems that you have on a pilgrimage, and you're all alone, and you're learning to depend on other people. Philanthropists, the tendency and the temptation, perhaps, is to think that if you're wealthy, you have it all together, that you have all the resources you need, you don't need anybody else, and you can be a lone ranger. But a philanthropist that's been changed by pilgrimage has learned that, no, they actually need other people. They need to walk with others in community, and that they're stronger when they walk together with others.
That's good.
Like you can't make these decisions in isolation.
Yeah.
And as a body of Christ, as the church, we're not meant to be isolated. We're meant to be in community. So pilgrimage has taught me that about my philanthropy.
Yeah. I like that. The next one, Mark, I liked was that you said walking pilgrimage means going slowly. So I understand that in a Camino, but how does that make sense as far as philanthropy?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think philanthropy, what is the purpose of our philanthropic donations? The purpose is, I mean, we flippantly say we want to change the world. But how long does it take to change the world? It's a very slow process.
Yeah.
And philanthropy, when our agenda, when our longing is to see social and spiritual change in people's lives in society, that doesn't happen overnight. It's not an instant cure-all. The donations we're making won't fix the social problems overnight. We have to partner with our charity partners and walk with them through decades of generosity and of the opportunity to see transformation happen in people's lives.
Wow. And the third point, you already alluded to it and said this, but was you gather companions along the way. And you did mention about how, as a philanthropist, you can't just do this on your own.
Yeah.
But just talk a little bit about that. I think it's important, again, to remind people you can't do life alone.
No.
And when people try to do it in isolation, I mean, I don't...
you can do it, but I think it's very sad.
It is sad. And it's not... You're not living in the fullness of,
Right.
of what that means to be loved or... even with accountability or people committed to or loyal to you, to have fun with, even just basic things to hang out with and do things.
Right.
I think that's important. Anything else on that third point about the importance of the companions along the way?
Yeah, I mean, over the Camino, I accumulated different companions, some very unusual characters. And the beautiful thing about it was, when you're stripped of everything, and you're walking alone through Spain, just, whoever you're going to encounter on the Camino and start walking beside, there's someone that you're really grateful for, and in normal life, you may never have anything to do with a 24-year-old French anarchist, like I walked with, or a 70-year-old Indian mystic.
Wow.
And I started walking with these guys, and walking with them helped me realize, that God might be at work in my life, but He's at work in their lives as well, and that I needed them and they needed me on this journey. But in philanthropy, I think that the opportunity exists for us to step it up a notch and move beyond our isolated giving and give in community with other people. And so I developed an initiative called Stronger Together. This is several years prior to Hillary Clinton developing this as a campaign slogan.
The hashtag Stronger Together.
But for 8 years now, we've been running Stronger Together, and it's a granting initiative where several major donors come together. This year we have 6 different foundation partners coming together and offering funds for innovation by Christian charities. And each partner is giving only a smaller percentage of the total amount available. But together we're stronger, and we learn from each other as we make these decisions. And so that's how it's applied to me in my philanthropy.
Amazing. Mark, there's so much more in your book. You talk about giving is more than just a financial transaction. You talk about this countercultural way of living and giving generously. And, for anybody, it's not just for philanthropists. I believe your book, there's very specifics in it, but I believe in this, sort of chronicle of your journey, a diary of sorts. It's about giving well. It's about all of us on this pilgrimage of how do we make sense of our own giving and finances, the people along the way, our companions, about this excess baggage. So there's a lot of values that this book, your story, can really, encourage us, people that have a lot and people that don't.
Yeah.
What's your hope? We have a few minutes left. What's your hope that when people pick up this book, what do you want them, when they close the book, to come away with?
I think my hope would be that when we look at our giving, that our giving moves beyond being a transaction. So giving can be very transactional. You've probably been requested to text $5 to some emergency that's happening. And that's a transactional thing that you're doing. You have no connection to where that money is going. And with major donors as well, when it's tens of thousands of dollars, the giving can become kind of transactional. There is nothing, that is a good thing. Giving is good even if it's transactional. But you can move beyond that to letting giving become a transformational event in your life, where giving becomes something where you're not just changing the world, but you are being changed because of the surrender of the resources, and you're entering in and engaging with the communities in need. My greatest opportunities have been when I can leave my safe, comfortable place and travel in the developing world, walk in communities where, the poverty is immense, and meet these people in their homes with dirt floors and tin roofs, and recognize that they have life and they have freedom and they have joy in living. And it didn't take having all the stuff that we have here,
Right.
but they have faith and they have community and they have humor and they have social networks. Very rich people in many ways that we don't normally see from our vantage point.
That's good. Mark Petersen, thank you so much. CEO of StrongerPhilanthropy.ca.
Yes.
Author of the book Love Giving Well, The Pilgrimage of Philanthropy. You can pick that up on Amazon, right? Amazon.ca as well.
Yeah.
And on your website?
On the website, StrongerPhilanthropy.ca /book.
/book. Thank you so much. Viewers, listeners, pick up Mark's book as soon as you can. It will inspire you in your giving. For those that are considering as families what to do as far as, setting up foundations or being more, philanthropists and giving into Canada, connect with Mark right away. And again, what a pleasure it was to have you.
Thank you, Melinda.
Well, that's all the time we have this week, and hopefully you liked it. I know I'd hit that thumbs up button if I were you. You can also leave a rating on Apple Podcasts, and it helps the show reach way more people. You don't have to give the show 5 stars, but it's strongly encouraged.